Hi, welcome back to Grounded in Galactic. I'm your host, Arash. So today is an important episode. It mirrors a lot of what's going on in my life at the moment. So I'd like you to enjoy. So every major breakthrough in human history began with a question that most people weren't ready to hear. Not because it was necessarily wrong, but because it challenged what everyone thought they already knew was right. But history has a fascinating pattern. The pioneers who changed our world were rarely welcomed with open arms. More often than not, they were criticised, ridiculed, ostracised, or even persecuted. And it's not because their ideas had already been disproven, far from it. It was because they dared to think differently. So let's give some historical examples. Let's start with Galileo Galilei. Now, when Galileo pointed his telescope towards the heavens, he discovered something that completely changed the accepted beliefs of his time. He observed that Jupiter had moons orbiting it. Now, this meant not everything revolved around the Earth. Of course, today, for us, that sounds obvious. But early in the 1600s, it threatened deeply held religious and philosophical beliefs. Now, poor Galileo wasn't simply criticised. He was tried by the Roman Inquisition, forced to publicly recant his findings, and spent the remainder of his life under house arrest. Today, however, he's remembered as one of the forefathers of modern science. Then there's my favourite, Nikola Tesla. Tesla imagined a world powered by alternating current, wireless communication, remote controls, free energy, and technologies that most people thought belonged in fantasy. Many of his ideas were dismissed. His financial backers abandoned him because of his free energy ideas, and others profited from his inventions while he actually struggled financially. And he died, seemingly alone in a New York hotel room with very little recognition. Today, our modern electrical world, though, it exists largely because of the foundations that Nikola Tesla built, if you weren't aware. Then came Ignaz Semmelweis. Working in Vienna during the 1840s, he noticed something extraordinary. Doctors moving directly from autopsies to delivering babies seemed to be associated with a much higher maternal death rate. So he asked one simple question: what happens if we wash our hands? Now, when doctors began washing with chlorinated lime, maternal deaths fell dramatically. You might think everyone celebrated, but instead, many doctors were deeply offended by the suggestion that they themselves might be contributing to patient deaths and harm. So, of course, Semmelweis was mocked. He was isolated by his peers, removed from his position, and tragically died in an asylum before germ theory eventually proved him right. And then there's a local Australian professor, Barry Marshall, who I believe is from Western Australia. For decades, stomach ulcers were blamed almost entirely on stress and lifestyle. Barry Marshall believed, however, something different. He believed a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori was responsible. When nobody believed him, he did something extraordinary. He deliberately drank the bacteria himself. He developed gastritis as a result of that and proved his hypothesis, and forever changed the way that we treat in medicine, ulcers. Years later, he received the Nobel Prize. So, these stories are not proof that every unconventional idea is correct. Far from it. History also contains many ideas that failed when properly tested. That's precisely why evidence matters. Science isn't really about defending the status quo, nor is it about accepting every new idea without question. Science is about remaining curious, enough to ask difficult questions, but disciplined enough to test them honestly and humbly enough to change our minds when the evidence points in a new direction. So being unconventional doesn't automatically make someone right. But neither does being conventional. Progress has always depended upon people willing to respectfully question assumptions, to explore new possibilities, and to follow evidence wherever it leads. Many of today's accepted truths were actually yesterday's impossible ideas. So perhaps instead of asking, does this sound different? Why should we just not ask, what does the evidence actually show and say? Because every generation inherits assumptions, and every generation has the opportunity, and perhaps, I think, the responsibility, to challenge them. So as always, stay curious, question everything, but let evidence, integrity, and compassion guide your journey. Until next time, this is Grounded and Galactic. Namaste.